You've just entered the No Delusion Zone. I'm David Dubato. Today, my very special guest is Ben Hodges. Ben is a retired lieutenant general from the United States Army. Ben is also the former commander of U.S. Army Europe, where he was in a very unique position to observe first the Army of the Soviet Union and later on the Army of the Russian Federation. Ben can be seen virtually every day on internet, news, and information platforms discussing Russia, the war in Ukraine, NATO, the EU, and when prodded, the upcoming US election. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome again to the No Delusion Zone, Ben Hodges. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, I can't believe you let me come back. Thank you.
Well, it took a lot of arm twisting, but you're here. As I said in the brief intro, obviously you primarily discuss the military matters and strategy and tactics about the war in Ukraine, and of course that's what you should discuss and what I usually discuss. However, we have an existential election, in my opinion, coming up in 3 weeks in the United States, as you're well aware, and so I'd like to focus on that. And in the very brief amount of time that you have today, I know you've got to run to another commitment. Ben, I was reading some unsettling stories over the last couple of days, and I'll just jump right into them. One of them is the fact that even the hurricane, which I actually had to endure in the last couple of days, Hurricane Milton, and before that, Hurricane Helene, which just devastated the southeast part of the United States, even those tragedies have been politicized for this election. And just yesterday, I was reading where FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Authority that works to help people that have survived these tragedies, has had to pull out of certain counties within North Carolina because the Republicans under MAGA, and specifically rumors put out by Trump, said that FEMA is going to, I believe one of their rumors was they are going to go into these communities and instead of pull people out, they're going to bulldoze houses and bury those survivors that are still alive. And that has resulted in armed right-wing, far right-wing militias confronting FEMA and the National Guard to the point where FEMA, under the National Guard's protection, has had to pull out their rescuers from these areas that have suffered these tragedies. From strictly a national security standpoint, could you at least briefly comment on that? Because I'm disgusted.
Yeah, it really is alarming. I heard yesterday from a friend whose son was deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division into Western Carolina as part of the recovery effort, and they reported being confronted, and more than just the usual, guys driving around in what's pretty much an open carry sort of a culture there. This was something different, and it really reflects, unfortunately, that people are so vulnerable to disinformation. I know other people, when I asked, were they ready for the hurricane, or were they worried about reconstruction efforts, and they say, well, I heard from a person up in North Carolina that the government's not delivering things. I'm like, what? And the fact that anybody would threaten a FEMA employee, I mean, these are Americans. These are literally from the agency that's there to help, more than any other agency. And so why would somebody intentionally create a situation where people felt that FEMA was the enemy? I mean, that just is very disconcerting to me.
Well, me too. And I have to say, like I said, I'm in the southeast part of the United States. I just went through 2 hurricanes in the last 2 weeks. And as I was helping one of my neighbors actually dig out from some of the damage that was done here, and I'll have to say, he is an individual who flies the Confederate flag occasionally, was commenting on just that. And he was saying how it's disgusting that all of our money is going to feed, clothe, and give jobs to illegal immigrants instead of giving them to FEMA. That FEMA is so understaffed and underfunded that we don't have enough money to even save Americans who have undergone all of these tragedies. And, that he's not an outlier on this. That's a very, very common belief. And as you just mentioned, I think that the information war is being lost, to be honest with you, Ben. It's being lost. I don't know if we have enough time before the election to win it back.
Well, I'm so old that I was in school long before the internet and iPhones and all that. But I can remember my seventh grade teacher, Ms. McKendry, there in Quincy, Florida, saying, Ben, you have to have more than one source. Now, this is before the internet. We only had 3 or 4 TV channels. And she said, you can't rely on just one TV channel or one newspaper or one magazine. You remember magazines used to be the principal news sources. And she says, you got to have more than one. So even back then, she was teaching us to be critical in our thinking about what we see and hear. And nowadays, it just seems like people will have become so vulnerable to disinformation. And so not only do you have the MAGA party using that, I mean, a level of dishonesty and disinformation that I have never in my life witnessed in the United States. We've never been perfect, but I have never seen it like this. But it's also the enemies of our country, the Chinese, the Russians, Iranians, North Koreans, they see this and they exploit our vulnerability. I mean, we know that there's millions of dollars being spent to pay influencers to just repeat nonsense, and that gets picked up and replayed over and over. And so if you stand around like a farm animal just waiting to be fed, that you're going to get fed all kinds of nonsense. And unfortunately, too many people believe it.
What do you say, Ben, to people that I actually not confront, but speak with every day? Because as I said, I live in the Southeast, and there's no shortage of MAGA supporters here, Republican voters and so forth. What do you say to them when you tell them things like you just said, basically that a lot of what they read on social media, on internet sites, on right-wing television programs, on Fox News, of course, comes directly from Kremlin talking points, that a lot of the positions that are put out by the Republican Party, by Trump, by their elected officials, are literally coming from our enemies, in some cases Russia, in some cases, like you said, China, Iran, North Korea. What do you say to these people when they say, so what? I agree with them. Maybe they're right. How do you confront that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And only in the last few months have I begun to get this kind of and I think you know me, David, I'm an optimist by nature, because I've always believed in the power of positive leadership and having a positive vision about what can be done. But I have begun to get this sinking feeling that a lot of Americans actually don't either appreciate or understand or value the democracy that we grew up with. I never in my life would I have dreamed that that people would be willing to give up rights, or to say, we really need a stronger leader to clamp down on certain things, and that without respect for our constitutional rights. And I think this is, I think there is a part of America that wants a more authoritarian type of government without perhaps realizing what it is they're asking for. The separation of church and state. That was a founding principle by the men who wrote our Declaration of Independence and then our Constitution. This was a founding principle. And they were all church-going Christian men, but yet they realized you had to have, if you were serious about liberty and freedoms, those had to be separated. And what we see now is, and I say this as a lifelong Presbyterian, what we see now is a merging of people on the right-wing extremists who are incorporating religious extremism, almost to the point of being like the Taliban, making decisions or wanting to be in position to make decisions for all the rest of us based on their religious view. That's not what is in our Constitution, but it does feel like more and more people are willing to give into that. And I don't know where that comes from.
I think that it comes from the fact that many Americans, before the era of social media and the internet, really had this authoritarian slant, or really did like that. They wanted an authoritarian government, and they were held back. They were held back because they were thought of as cranks and weirdos and un-American, and they were shoved to the side. But once the internet and the social media took over, they were able to find like-minded folks like themselves, and they realized, wait a minute, maybe I'm not in the minority, or even if I am, it's a very large minority. And I believe personally that that's what's happened. And I'm an optimist too, but I'll be honest with you. Not only that, I'm for the most part a lifelong Republican. Ever since Trump, I've become an independent. So it's not that I'm some woke again person that's walked around with flowers in my hair. Not at all. It's just what's happened in the last 10 years or so. So I'm very, very despondent about what's going on. Look what happened in Oklahoma, though, talking about the separation of church and state. I'm sure you're aware of the law there. They are now requiring that all public schools teach the Ten Commandments. In fact, that it be enshrined at the entrance and in every classroom. And in fact, there is no separation of church and state in Oklahoma, and Texas and some other states are not far behind.
Yeah. This is a troubling tendency. And again, I say this as a Presbyterian, a Christian, and also I too was a Republican up until January the 6th. And after that, I said I could not be, I did not want to be associated with a party that thought that that was okay. And I would just say to those in your audience who have a similar background or having a hard time thinking, man, oh man, how in the hell do I vote for Kamala Harris? I would just say you can disagree on policies, but there was never a question about with her and her campaign about our Constitution or whether or not she would accept the outcome of an election. And I looked at what General Milley, what came out in the interview with Bob Woodward, where he talks about President Trump being a fascist and the most dangerous person in America. I've known Mark Milley for many years, exceptionally talented, intelligent officer, highest integrity. And so that's what he sees. And that's what others see as well, that Mr. Trump is surrounding himself with people now that will enable those tendencies. I spoke to and I'm saying this as a veteran myself, and knowing that you have veterans out there in your audience also. I spoke to a colonel a couple of months ago, very, very talented colonel who has the opportunity by virtue of his current position to see a lot of the Army leadership. So I asked him, I said, so what's going on out there? How are the troops? What do you see? And he said, well, sir, you can be confident, soldiers, officers, their NCOs, they're doing what they should do. They will always be professional. He said, but I have heard that a lot of senior officers believe that if Trump is elected as president again, that all of the Joint Chiefs, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the vice chairman, the chief of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps will all be sacked and replaced. And of course, it's the prerogative of the president to nominate who he or she wants to fill these critical positions, just like in the Department of Defense, Department of State, et cetera. But it struck me in a way that, we don't normally change out all the military leadership just because you have a new president. There's a continuity that generally comes based on these officers serving a 2, 3, or 4-year term. So the first thing that I thought of is, well, that means that there will be a litmus test. And based on what former President Trump said when you talked about my generals, like we were Guatemala or something, when he would say, talk like that means he has the litmus test in mind, and officers would have to pass his litmus test, which obviously is going to be about loyalty to him, which is not our tradition. Our loyalty is to the Constitution of the United States. So that worries me, that officers would be put in that kind of position, and hopefully the best ones will be able to withstand having to pass some kind of a litmus test like that.
Well, again, as I said on the start of this episode, we've got the election coming up in 3 weeks. And if I ask you this question before, I apologize. Did you get a chance to watch that documentary War Game yet?
I have not.
Well, I'm going to ask you not about that, but about what do you think, again, from your position, retired Lieutenant General, Commander, former Commander of U.S. Army Europe, what do you think the possibility of even mid-level career officers or certainly National Guard officers listening to a defeated candidate Trump to disobey the orders of their commanding officers and enable him to regain the White House by either legal or semi-legal means? Do you see any possibility that there could be any rogue officers in the chain of command on November 6th?
Well, of course, I could not be 100% certain that out of the almost 2 million women and men that make up U.S. Armed Forces of all the branches of service, that there wouldn't be some that would violate their oath. But I am confident that the vast majority of officers, despite what their personal political leanings might be, that the vast majority, American people should be confident that officers will live up to their oath to the Constitution. This is something that we've talked about all the time. It permeates officer training and education. We talk about the responsibility to not obey an illegal order. And by the way, while based on this ridiculous Supreme Court ruling that the president has immunity from prosecution, which I still am in disbelief, that will not apply to officers who carry out an illegal order. So people should not be confused about just because the president may give what would be considered an illegal order and he's immune, the people that carry it out will not be immune. And I think this is a test. Now, this is a test of the fiber of the women and men who make up our armed forces. It's a test of the culture that we have worked on for almost 250 years. The Army's 250th birthday is coming up next year. That, our oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, that's strong enough to withstand the temptations or the fear of some sort of retribution.
I agree with you. I just want to say, Ben, I have the utmost faith in our military, especially our senior officers. I don't believe that at the very senior level or even near the senior level that there's going to be any mass amount of rogue officers that are going to do anything contrary to law and their oaths. What I fear, and it was made very clear in this documentary, is that some retired officers may respond to the orders of an illegal president, an illegal Trump order to take over from the current legally serving officers. And I'm going to talk specifically about Michael Flynn. I'm sorry, it's no question or no secret as to where his loyalties lie, and some very few others to get some troops behind them and to follow his orders. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I tell you what, just today again, Trump was saying that he believes that if the Democrats steal the election again, which he predicts they will, in his opinion, that the military is going to have to take action in order not to let them steal the election. All bets are off as far as I'm concerned. Do I think there'll be a mass uprising of rogue officers? No, of course not. But you don't need that. If you have a certain select mid-level officers and even National Guard to take over state capitals, that's enough of a disaster for a constitutional crisis. And I'm very concerned about that. And what are your thoughts?
Well, I have faith in our leaders, young people and leaders throughout the armed forces, to include the National Guard. And for National Guard, there's an extra pressure because they live right there and it's their communities. And they, in many cases, are closer in a practical sense to the political leadership in their communities. So it will require them to have the courage to withstand that kind of pressure that may occur in certain places. But I really I don't expect that to happen. Now, there are I've known Mike Flynn for many years, and everybody I talked to, we all just shake our head like, what happened? Because Mike Flynn was one of the bravest of the brave. He fought hard for his country as an officer in elite units. And so he's unrecognizable now. It's not the same person that I knew in Afghanistan and in other places. He's lost his way. And
What did happen, Ben? What happened to him? What
well,
happened I mean, in your opinion?
I just said I don't know. I mean,
No,
it's
no idea.
inexplicable. But there are others who are maybe not as outspoken as him, but who have been very clear. I mean, General Kellogg, former commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, he was part of Trump's administration, and he probably will be back in the next Trump administration. And I don't know how the former commander of the 82nd Airborne Division can openly support a guy who does not give a damn about our Constitution, and also who clearly has demonstrated through his actions over the past several months, he doesn't give a damn about veterans. He doesn't care about our soldiers. He literally trampled on a grave in Arlington Cemetery. And there are some others out there that have signed a letter endorsing him. Now, I mean, there was like several hundred names on this endorsing Trump. I only recognized about 3 of them, but nonetheless, there are, we got to be realistic. There are retired military that think he's the right guy to lead our country. And that's what probably gives me more concern, is not that they might try to lead a mutiny, but just that people with that level of education and who will have administered or taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution so many times in their career, that somehow that they think Donald J. Trump should be the president again.
Well, I can't understand, just as that, like you said, how any veterans can support Trump after all of the things he said and done to diss and just be a disgrace towards veterans, especially disabled veterans and their families. It's just beyond me. But getting back to what you just said about some of the officers and those that signed that letter, what concerns me is at the local level, honestly. There's a group also called the Constitutional Sheriffs Association. I don't know how familiar you are with them. At the local level, I wonder what's going to happen if they try to seize the ballots, if they try to seize state houses and interfere with the local elections at the state level, and they must then be confronted by that state's National Guard. I see that as a very, very potentially huge issue at the state level. Local law enforcement against National Guardsmen. Again, this is setting up to be a constitutional crisis. And I'm not a pessimist by nature, but the Trump people have had over 4 years to plan for this, and they have worked very, very hard. And I'm just very fearful of what might happen, especially at the state and local levels.
Well, I guess that's a possibility, and I don't imagine. I mean, I do imagine that there will be some isolated cases of things happening, but at the end of the day, I think enough, as usually happens in every crisis we've ever faced, enough women and men of character and selflessness will be willing to step forward and do what's right. And I tell you this. I am spend a lot of my professional time in Europe working with our allies in different capacities, and they are worried. All of our allies are worried about. I hear it all the time, like, what the hell is going on in America? They can't believe it, because they've all either been to school in the U.S. or their kids went to school in the U.S. or they've been with us in Iraq and Afghanistan. They see America's commitment to security and stability in Europe. So they know us, even though they know we've never been perfect. There always was an expectation of the American ideal, and they have so much respect for our system of government with the checks and balances in our Constitution. They know it, and right now they're like, "What is going on?" And this has nothing to do with Trump's going to make them pay more. Vladimir Putin is making Europeans pay more. That's, every country in Europe, even Germany, is increasing defense spending, not because they're scared of Donald Trump, but because they see what's happening, and they fear that if America leaves, that Russia will see that as invitation. So this is in our interest, and I think probably some of your listeners are thinking, well, why do we have all these troops over there guarding Europeans? Of course, there are less uniformed people in all of Europe than fill the University of Michigan football stadium or the University of Tennessee football stadium. I mean, so when you think about America's commitment over here, it's a relatively small number of soldiers and sailors and airmen. But there are hundreds of thousands, actually millions of Americans that live and work in Europe. Big chunks, every major American company has business in Europe. So this is in our interest to defend, to ensure stability and security in Europe because of our own interests. This is not charity for Europe or for Ukraine. And so I think the concern that a Trump administration would turn that upside down is real. And it's also, it reflects, I think, a very short-sighted, isolationist view that doesn't actually protect America's strategic interests.
I know you've got to run, Ben. One last question. We'll circle back right now to Ukraine. Last question. If Trump does win the election, do you see what his supporters are saying, that he's all bluster? When it comes to the end of the day, he will support NATO and he will not allow, Russia to rumble into the Baltic countries, and he'll make good on America's commitment. Do you think that Trump is full of it, or that, in fact, he will not support NATO if he believes they're not paying their fair share, or just for whatever reason?
Well, the fact that it's even a question is a problem. I mean, before Trump, never in my life did I ever hear any American president question America's commitment to NATO, because every American president, Republican and Democrat, understood that American prosperity is tied to European prosperity. And if you've got war, refugees, uncertainty, disruption of food and energy supplies, as happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that affects American prosperity. So this is not charity for Europe. And of course, the Chinese are watching. The Chinese are looking to see, are we serious when we talk about defense of sovereignty, freedom of navigation, international law? Because if we're not willing to do that in Europe, then the Chinese, I think, will feel emboldened to do whatever it is they're planning to do in the Indo-Pacific region. So this is in our interest. I worry that there's even any uncertainty about a Trump administration and how they would look at Europe. This is an invitation to Putin. Whenever we open the door to, well, maybe we wouldn't defend certain countries, that's an invitation to aggression. And so, will he, won't he? I don't know. I think that, honestly, I think that we would be unwise to just disregard that. Come on, that's just Trump. He's not the local foreman somewhere. He wants to be the president of the United States, the leader of the free world. And so when he says things like that are so irresponsible and so dangerous, it undermines all the good things that we are trying to do around the world. It causes people to lose confidence in us, and that only hurts us.
Ben Hodges, thank you. I know you've got to run. We probably won't speak before the other side of the election. Let's pray that we don't have to worry about what Donald Trump will say after the election. He won't be in power, but we shall have to see. Ben Hodges, thank you very much. And as always, stay safe and stay sane.
Thank you, Dave. I'm trying.
I know. We'll talk again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.